Hey everybody, can everybody see me? Awesome. Okay, that's going to be a little weird. I'm a few seconds behind, so that's going to take some getting used to. But bear with me. Tony must be planning to bleep me if I say anything inappropriate. So um, thanks for coming, everybody. Glad to have you. We wanted to take an opportunity to do this. We look back on some of the stuff we did with MHS Genesis many years ago, and one of the things I think that I saw was the most impactful positively for us were some of our industry touch points that we did together. And so, often we would get together, have half a day of us talking to you, and then we would just leave so that you guys could hang out together and build teams and do all that kind of stuff. And that was really beneficial from all of the feedback that we got from the proposals that we got. You could just tell that had a big impact. And so when we built Workforce 3, we really, really wanted to try to do that. We were planning to get the big space, big facilities, and all of that stuff. And then everybody knows what happened with coronavirus. So what we started thinking about at that time was, is there some way to keep doing that and to figure out another way to do it virtually and do all those things? So we had a lot of ideas, and what we came up with was sort of this forum. I think one of the benefits, the biggest benefit of this would be to say, hey, we really want as many of you to interact as frequently as possible. So we can do these a little bit more frequently. We can do them a little bit more informally. And so what we kind of envisioned was something like Twitch, if you've seen that. So I'm kind of watching the chat roll by so I can see what everybody's saying. Tony is my MC behind the scenes, so he's going to be monitoring your questions. We're going to go through a series of polls. Main thing is we want to keep this light, have a little bit of fun with it, and everything is fair game. Ask whatever you want. We'll be happy to answer anything we can. Anything that we can't, we'll take down. Amy's also supporting me behind the scenes, capturing everything. And all this will be recorded and made available for you guys on the Hive as well. So without further ado, Tony, I guess we can kind of roll in. So he's going to pop up, I think, some polls while we build some of the questions. So go ahead and drop your questions, and we'll start building up a body of that and start getting you some answers and some feedback. And yeah, we'll try to watch the chat to fill the dead space while everybody's answering the poll questions and stuff like that. So how's everybody doing out there, gearing up for the holidays? Oh, they warned me. They warned me about the chin strap. and I see it taking effect already. You'll have to forgive me a little bit, give us a little bit of indulgence. We were hoping to do this a couple of weeks ago, and it took a little bit of extra time to get it right. Now I'm fully into my quarantine for holiday travel for my family. So we're doing this from beautiful East Tennessee. And so you'll have to forgive the wardrobe, hair, makeup, lighting, all of the technical accoutrement that we don't have back in Northern Virginia. So you can just consider this my Mark Zuckerberg outfit. Oh, interesting. So the first poll, so it looks like we're about, I would say that's about the split that we would have expected. So we're trying to use some of these polls, I think, to get some ideas about audience and tailor some of the questions, comments, all of those things. So hopefully just keep hitting the chat box and giving us feedback if this is, boring or not helpful or whatever the case is. Just let us know and we can sort of pivot. So I don't know, Tony, how are we doing on questions? Are we getting any questions in that we can pivot to? Oh, there we go. So I can actually see the questions. There we go. So hi, Don. Thanks for asking. That's a good question. I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we're sort of closely monitoring feedback, monitoring our progress on draft RFP2. And I would say you'll probably see us post something a little bit later today or tomorrow that talks about sort of an updated timeline. We've been getting a lot of feedback about that. So I think we're sensitive about the Christmas holidays, all of those things. Of course, we want to spend time. We have lots of user loos that we have to get through as well. So I think we'll probably end up pushing draft 2 more towards the middle of the month and shoot for a final RFP that's probably in the early January timeframe. So hopefully everybody can have that time with their family and won't have to put together a proposal during the Christmas holiday. Okay, so we got a new one. How do we see small businesses be a part of this change? That's a good question. That's something that we're definitely trying to tease out through this whole draft RFP process. I tend to feel that small business is pretty critical in this effort. I think there are small businesses out there with unique capability sets that can bring a lot to this. As we've talked about, we're trying to get to more of an innovative, more of a startup culture. That's obviously something that is at least fairly closely aligned with small business as far as we're concerned. As I talked about in one of my posts, we really want to try to look at structuring things non-traditionally. So from a limited partnership model, hedge fund management models, any kind of sort of organizational construct that works, we're willing to explore. So if there's a small business out there, like we said, I think, the ability for small businesses to prime on this effort are higher than most efforts of this size. And that's something that we're trying to preserve that potential for. But even if we don't hit that hurdle, we certainly, I think you've seen, we'll have very high bars for small business subcontracting and non-traditional subcontracting. We don't view this as an effort necessarily where the prime is going to capture 60, 70, 80% of the work. That's not what we want. And so we're trying to put a lot of incentives to have meaningful work share. So if anybody has any ideas or feedback about that, ways that we can measure that behavior and drive that behavior and use that behavior to reward primes for doing a little bit more small business subcontracting, we are definitely open to that. If there's an obvious barrier to small business participating, we definitely want to hear about that too. So while Tony's putting up some of the other questions, I see some fairly easy questions popping in that I'll just kind of hit before he pops on the screen. When will companies be engaged for OCI pre-screens? We're planning to do that probably right after Thanksgiving. So you'll see those pretty shortly. Oh, he popped one up and then took it away. Oh, there we go. Can you clarify that Workforce 3 is about product management to deliver great products versus creating them, or is it both? The way I would look at it is we do, so I'm glad you used the word product. That's definitely very cool. What we're trying to get away from is sort of the way I would put it is we've gotten pretty good at the DoD 5000 program and project management. And that's definitely a necessary layer. A lot of the capability and experience we lack, I think, is around the actual product management. There's all kinds of articles, and I can maybe post some on the Hive that I've been reading that do a really good job of highlighting the differences between product and program management. And so a lot of this is about helping our teams slowly evolve, reorganize themselves, learn how to do product management and layer that in. So I don't see this Workforce 3 contract as delivering the actual product capabilities. So this is not going to be a contract that delivers MHS Genesis, that delivers our JOMIS products, that delivers DES or JLV or EADS products and things like that. This is about giving the programs everything they need to do really good product management along with the really good program management, and to really help our organization grow, and then to help build the PEO. And what Ms. Jors will say is that she wants the PEO to provide really great services to her programs, and that's what we're trying to build up with this effort. So this is really about sort of building that ship without letting it sink, right? And so those are capability sets that we've never used and don't have, and that's what we're trying to get to. But what you'll see is some of our other things like the DevMac and our other prime mission capability product contracts will be separate from this Workforce 3 effort, if that makes sense. And if that didn't make any sense, please feel free to add that to the chat. We'll try to get some more clarification and specifics. Can we talk about the task order process that we had on one of our slides in the draft RFP? So I would definitely encourage you to go check out the video that we had that dove into the task order slides in a little bit more detail. What we probably plan to post a little bit later is some of the almost day in a life vignettes for some of those task orders, like what are the input and output criteria and some of those other things about exactly how they'll work. But philosophically, what we're trying to get to with the task order process is more probably more frequent and more, I guess, chunked up task orders. Essentially, what we want to do is be able to break it down into pieces that are sort of finite, and that are risk manageable, so that we can have fixed price task orders, so that we're not limiting competition to people who have accounting systems, so that we're not limiting competition to people who have a lot of monetary assets. We really want to focus on cash flow and pull cash flow to the left, do a lot of those different things. So our task order strategy is really meant to sort of be built up around your user experience. We don't want you to sign up for long task orders that are really risky, with bad assumptions that we're going to drive you to change over time. So we're going to look, so we have a repetitive, iterative design process. So, you'll propose something in the RFP, you'll get a chance to do a design process that's more of an agile design process, and then you'll get a task order, and then you'll perform it, and we'll evaluate sequentially through, rather than just setting these rigid requirements and letting those ride for a year and sort of say, do your best and see what you get out of the other end. It's really about being more interactive, more engaged, taking more of that continuous delivery approach to contract products. And so that's what we're shooting for, and that's what we've built it around. So definitely check out that video where we go into a little bit more detail about how they work. And then we'll definitely be adding some more information in the next couple of weeks about how each one of those will work. So looking at this poll question, that's definitely an interesting response to the poll question, right? So a lot of what we've been doing, I think, has been geared around sort of lowering those barriers to non-traditional. So it's interesting that we have about 9% of those sent out there. And then sort of a big mix between the consulting and system integrators. So I think that probably tells me that we need probably to do even a little bit more outreach to the non-traditionals, but it's definitely interesting that we're getting close to the double digits on the non-traditionals. That's probably even a little bit better than I would have expected at this point. Sorry if you see my face bubbling all over the place. It's just I'm trying to monitor about 3 different data flows. Maybe next time I'll have an actual video game in the background or something as well. So are you still looking at 2 to 4 contracts? If so, it seems likely small businesses would need to be subs. So I think in our primary model, that's sort of what we're looking at. I think we have a couple other ideas that we may throw out pretty shortly, where we would have potentially some additional tranches, maybe specifically for small business, but we're still exploring those options. But right now, I think for the prime sort of core work, I think the model that we have, where we want to take a metrics-based approach to rewarding with continuous business, it would be difficult, if not outright disingenuous, to have more contractors than that, who are sort of sitting in the background with no real chance to ever win any work under the multiple award structure. So we're trying to sort of delicately balance that, and we're exploring a lot of different ideas to sort of maximize that participation. We likely will have also probably some on-ramps and off-ramps that'll be coming out on draft 2, so you'll see some of that. So whatever we do in the initial award, we don't intend for that to be the last opportunity under Workforce 3, so definitely check some of that out as well. I'm trying to scroll, see if there's easy ones while Tony works his magic on the. So I see, okay. Types of non-traditional organizations are you hoping to see on a winning team? So I think this is a great question. And I think so what we've seen is we really want someone who has that experience really delivering a really great product to market in the technology space, not necessarily the healthcare space. And I think that's where you'll see in some of our gates. We're really trying to encourage teaming that's outside of the MHS. We don't really candidly think that businesses with only MHS experience or who are built primarily around MHS experience are really going to be able to drive us forward transformatively the way that we really need them to. And so, I wouldn't be totally disappointed if we got someone with venture capital experience to help us make those kind of investment decisions. Somebody with hedge fund experience, startup experience, entrepreneur experience. If you've taken a product through Series A, Series B, Series C, the way we're trying to build ourselves, that's really the same way we're going to look at the products that we deliver. So that's a definitely experience set that we don't currently have. So to me, that's probably the biggest hole. And so I think that's where some of the non-traditionals can definitely fit into the process. And that's what we would be kind of looking to encourage. Okay, yeah, definitely hit this poll. So as you could probably see, we have really streamlined how we want to do the evaluation, and that's really because we care about your experience with this proposal process. So what we're trying to get to is a model that's really efficient, both from our evaluation perspective, but also from your bid and proposal dollar perspective. So most of the big companies and things like that out there, I've read your management approach and your hiring approach and all those things 150 times. I candidly just probably don't need to read them again. So we're trying to get away from just having a bunch of proposal fluff that costs you money to put together, that takes us a lot of time to evaluate, and really doesn't, frankly, result in any kind of distinction to make meaningful source selection decisions. So it's definitely interesting. So I think the gates leading the behavior model, that's exactly where I would be too, from a perspective of, I think those are the two places that we're really looking for the most feedback. One thing I would say is a lot of the feedback that we've gotten so far, to be candid, is probably more from the proposal and business development teams. And I think what we're looking for before we finalize those criteria and put a whole lot more out are from the people in your companies who actually have the experience doing this work, who have successfully delivered the kind of products that we want to deliver, and tell us, do those gates make sense? Does that behavior model make sense? And then give us specific ideas for what makes sense. I think the gate specifically, the one thing I would want you to take away when you give feedback on the gates are not about limiting competition or who can participate. It's about making sure that every team has the people that we need to be successful. And so we don't want to waste your time putting together proposals. We don't want to waste our time evaluating proposals if the teams are not compatible. So this, is sort of intended to drive the behavior and the team formation process. We really want people to hook up together and have that real breadth and depth of what we need to get to. And we're really just trying to avoid getting 12 prime proposals and having none of those teams have the right people on the team, right? So it's really about guiding participation and guiding all that stuff. It's not meant to be competition limiting. So when you think about it from that perspective, what we're really trying to get to with the gates is, does that team holistically have the breadth and depth of knowledge that we need to be able to be successful? And remember, and this goes into the behavior model, what we really want is we really want transformative evolution here. And so we acknowledge that we're not going to be the champion for that. Most of the time, we're probably going to be a barrier. So we're really looking for the workforce 3 contractor to be the champion for driving us forward, to convince the stubborn people that this is the right thing to do and show them what the value is. So you guys have really got to be the experts, and you really got to be the owners. And so when we evaluate behavior, what we're trying to get to is we want every person on your team to be rewarded however you reward them for our success, whether that's an individual employee doing support agreement process for us, whether that is a subcontractor organization on your team, whether that is the executives within your account or division. We really want everybody to be aligned with pushing the PEO forward, and everybody should be rewarded because of that. And so we're trying to, we want you to look at, that doesn't happen unless people behave a certain way, and people don't behave a certain way unless you motivate and reward them. And so we're trying to evaluate, how do you do that? And so that's what we're trying to get to. So while everybody answers this poll question, I think this is another interesting one, right? And like I said, the gates are really about trying to drive behavior, trying to drive you guys to make teams that make sense for us. And so what I would say, it's interesting that the bulk of people feel like they can join a team, and I think that's good. So we're feeling kind of confident about the gates not excluding anybody, which I think is pretty good, although that 6% that said very unlikely, would be curious to hear about why. But I think getting back to it is I don't necessarily want you to prime, because you've traditionally been a prime. You always prime. You only participate in these contracts as a prime. The gates are really going to come down to a business decision for you. And I think that's what we saw on MHS Genesis, is it didn't cut down the number of teams in the source selection. We almost didn't gate anyone. Everybody that participated got through, but it's because they chose to form teams. And we know that there were people who chose not to join those teams because they only like to prime. Well, that's not us limiting that's not us limiting competition. That is you making a business decision that you'll only prime. And so if you can't find a team as a prime, you kind of have to look at yourself and say, is that something that we would rather do as a teammate or a partner? And I kind of talked about it a little bit in my post. People that you kind of don't like maybe sometimes might be your best partners. And so I think people have got to really get creative, and however we can incentivize that and reward that, that's what we want to hear about. So I see. Okay, that's it. So how does DHMS culture support a fail fast culture? What is the reaction learning versus punishment? So this is an area, to put it charitably, I think we're taking baby steps towards this to some extent, right? We sell at pockets who don't like to fail or have the appearance of failure. And so this is definitely a massive cultural effort. And so I just talked about, I think, a little bit in the last question, driving the behavior. This is definitely something that people are going to have to target, right? And at some point we would like to not fail at all. We would like to succeed fast. And so, I think we recognize there's going to be some turmoil, and that's what we've said. So I think if you look at the structure of the contract that we're trying to put together, what you're going to see is we're not going to punish sort of individual failures. We're measuring outcomes. So if you can help us hit the goals that we're trying to achieve and that we lay out during the sort of design to outcome task orders, then you're going to get rewarded. And so we're not going to look to punish from that perspective. We want to lay out clear goals. We want you to take ownership of pushing those goals forward, and then we'll reward you about or based on how you achieve them or not. So while Tony's moving to the next one, I see a lot in here about CTAs. So I'm not totally familiar with those. So if somebody wants to send us more feedback through the question mechanism about what they envision and how those would work on this, we would definitely be willing to take a look at those. For performance-based incentive design, how are you thinking about a pool for game changer incentive? So I'm trying to figure out right now, weighing the pros and cons. Do we want to set the pool of game changer incentive, or do we want to allow the contractors to propose them? Obviously, if you propose them, you have more control over the upside, the potential of the pool, and you get to balance that with your sort of competitive evaluated price. So from my perspective, that's very nice, and that's probably how I would lean, rather than us just setting a ceiling for them. But these are intended to be sort of and if I have to do a formal fixed price award fee plan, I will. But these are almost meant to be a subjective sort of incentive base, because we want to be able to reward stuff that we see on the ground. The difference between traditional incentive plans is we want this one to be rapid. And again, this is about pulling cash flow to the left for you guys. So if we see something, if you're able to go in and say, we have totally figured out cybersecurity. You can now do your accreditations in 10 minutes and there's never any pushback and questions. You might get a very large game changer incentive for that, because at that point, holy crap, you wouldn't have changed the game. You probably changed the whole world. Otherwise, we might see some behavior on the ground where somebody stands up to leadership and says, no, you're doing a really stupid thing and you need to do this instead. Well, that might be a cultural game changer that we want to reward. So, there's a lot of different ways you could look at that. I think what we'll probably end up doing is having a lot of our government employees empowered to nominate them for small amounts, and then sort of ratchet up the approval levels, sort of the higher the reward amount goes. But we want them to be real. We want them to happen. And really as a result of you achieving outcomes that we didn't think were achievable. So while people are answering this poll question, I see one: do you see prime mission product companies being a part of a team? I don't think our prime mission product companies will be part of a team. You might have someone like Instagram or something on your team giving you that technical product experience, but I think we'll have some OCI problems if you're delivering our prime mission products and sort of supporting this. Okay, so this is another really interesting poll for me, and actually sort of pleased with the results. I'm glad that people are getting a high level of management involvement. I think what we've hoped and what we've sort of seen in the questions and feedback that we've been getting so far, we're a little bit lacking in the technical sort of solution architect level. And I think this poll sort of bears that out. I would hope to probably have that up more, in the 30% range. So I think if anything, as folks are looking, please give the documents that we've posted, the videos we've posted. If you can get it to your really smart architects, your really smart creative people, the people who will actually sort of be giving us this expertise. We really want to hear some of those really brass tacks, like particularly around the gates, the metrics, the behaviors. Are the ideas we have, what we're looking at, are those really the right things to be looking at? We're very much open to feedback in those areas, but we really want it from a viewpoint of folks who've actually delivered products, designed products, gone through all of these new techniques that we have never tried before. So we keep saying OCI is a very fact-specific thing, and so it's difficult to really say in an abstract hypothetical. That said, I think probably the DevMac one, because that's where we're going to be looking for coders and designers to really help the program offices actually deliver products. That one is probably the most unfriendly from an OCI perspective with the other three. The other three are really more management of particular sort of mid and back office solutions that support the product developers, but we will actually have prime mission product people on the DevMax, so that one is probably the one that will be the most impacted by OCI. So while Tony's queuing up, see if I see any easy ones. Okay, so that's interesting. So mostly people either are registered on the Hive or don't know what it is. So I think we can work on getting some posts out that let people know that. If you don't know what Hive is, check us out on Beta Sam. You can look up the HT0038, and you'll find the links to all these efforts in the Hive as well. So I see some questions about foreign employees on several of these while everybody's answering this poll. We'll follow the clauses in the FAR and DFARS. Whatever limitations are there, we'll follow. I don't know, conceptually that'll be totally ruled out, but it's something that if you're going to do that, you'll want to make sure that you can fully demonstrate that you're compliant with all of the FAR and DFARS requirements there. Interesting. So gate one is where people find the most challenges. I think that's definitely feedback that we can take and that we'll go look at. I would be curious, I think, if folks are finding that one the most limiting. If anybody wants to give specific feedback about how gate one is the most challenging one, that would be very helpful for us. And I think so. Tony's thrown this up on the screen. I think, this is definitely an area where we talked about, like, if you have people who have, really, really done that digital transformation, are those things in the gates things that will actually drive the teams we want. We definitely are open to feedback on that, and we are definitely, these are our ideas that we put out, right? We don't know right, wrong, or different. So we would love, again, technical feedback, creative feedback, all of those things, right? So in multiple words, how do you envision the separate companies working together to meet your objectives? That's an interesting question. I think it's almost down to the teams, right? Certainly the model that we have where there's the potential that follow-on core task orders can be competed in the multiple award construct. That sort of puts you in a competitive environment. And then we also have sort of the secondary contractors where we want to keep them on warm failovers, and we have task orders for special projects to keep them working together. I think, certainly I think it would benefit us and probably benefit you if the multiple awardee teams were to find ways to partner on some of the task orders. So if there are ways that we can encourage that, I know that people don't like that necessarily, and it's not really a popular strategy from a growth and business development perspective. But if there's some way that we can incentivize those kinds of arrangements, we're happy to look into it. So while Tony's working on that, I see a comment about non-traditional rates. We definitely don't want to look at this as a service acquisition or a labor acquisition. We're really trying to get outcomes. And so if people have non-traditional pricing models that are not as tied to labor rates, if they're tied to teams or, even months of work, like, we're happy to look at whatever basis of estimate that you are willing to provide. Has this acquisition strategy been approved by leadership up the DoD chain? Do you foresee issues with FAR compliance? So I'm going to answer the second part first. No, I don't think we have issues with FAR compliance. I don't think anything that we're doing requires any kind of deviation from FAR or DFARs. I think at the end of the day, it'll be relatively standard, probably Part 12 type terms and conditions. The acquisition strategy, we're waiting to fully brief to leadership until we get feedback on draft 1. We'll probably do that before draft 2. But we have had initial briefs up through our sort of first layer of SES leadership to this date. We've been working internally with our IPT across all the programs and PEO leadership. We have Mr. Tenaglia is obviously briefed up on that, is a strong supporter, probably even more beneficial to us in his new role, much as we hate losing him in his old role over at DPC. So we have a very tight relationship. As you all know, we meet monthly with our senior steering group, where we have kind of ready access to the ASDs and DASD. So I don't foresee there being too much problem, especially if we have buy-in. And since we're taking such a bilateral approach to this, where we get a lot of feedback from industry, if there's a lot of interest and energy behind it, I don't see anybody really pushing back too hard. Do you have a vision for the perfect team capabilities and understanding? So I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say no because, as we've said, we don't really do what we're trying to do right now. So what I have is a lot of book learning, a lot of training from teammates and partners. I largely do not have practical experience in this. And so this is why it's so crucial and why we wanted to have a bilateral, because in terms of a lot of things like user design, design thinking, human-centered design, we don't do that. We really have no capabilities. We don't have a lot of coders on staff. We don't have a lot of that thinking across our current contract portfolio. It's just something that we don't have. We don't know enough about it to have a vision. That's why we're trying to lay out a very clear outcome. And we really want you to compete based on what your vision is. So you have to show us the value of what you're proposing. And that's how we're going to pick the people that win. So no, I don't think we have any kind of preconception. We've talked about a lot of things that we think about. Potential, sort of limited partnership / general partnership models that are sort of quasi venture capital aligned, hedge fund management aligned. But the universe is infinite and we don't know. So we're looking forward to getting some ideas. So again, will you be looking for talent with DHMS experience on resume or open to fresh blood? So again, that's sort of a delicate balancing act. I certainly think that we need a lot of fresh ideas. And so far, what I've seen in trying to do the transformative effort, the idea is way more important than experience, because we are treading into water that we've never been in before. There may be some elements that aren't going to change all that much. Some of the processes that MHS Genesis does are pretty mature now and pretty stable to them, and probably don't need to change all that much. So it could be knowledge of that is more important. And so it's really going to be probably looking across all of the data that we can provide you about our programs and sort of figuring out which ones need to transform the most. And so that's why we're trying to get to a model in the evaluation that shows behavior and lets us choose based on behavior, because we don't expect to be able to figure everything out in the initial source selection proposal. That's why we have the design to outcome task orders. That's why we measure progress every year. That's why we've adapted the high watermark bar. We don't know how much we need to change over any given period of time, and we don't know how far we want you to push us. So please take a look at all of that stuff and give us feedback. So the periodic table, should we interpret as the scope to resupply finance and facilities management staff? So that's an interesting question. So the periodic table is meant to be an example. It's a notion. You shouldn't take it as that is everything we need. You shouldn't take it as we need everything on the periodic table. We want anything that a world-class technology organization needs, from a mid and back office corporate ops perspective, that is required to enable its product teams to be spectacular. And so we want to leave that outcome as the scope, and not hem ourselves into a specific set of services. So I'm not aware of anything being done on the scale of a PEO running like this. I know that I've seen Kessel Run, where they have abandoned, their badges and their uniforms and all of that stuff to sort of look like this. I don't think they're quite at PEO scale. I could be wrong about that. But it really is about applying this to a tech company that is a multi-division, turning this into sort of a tech org that is a multi-division, multi-product line sort of perspective. So it's definitely new. We have long looked at ourselves as one of the sort of, organizations akin to an AFWERX or a NavalX or a Futures Command in the fourth estate. So I think it's reasonable. I'm glad that you drew that conclusion and asked that question. So that's an interesting poll. Again, so probably roughly 2/3 of you are pretty comfortable with the challenge. I'd be interested to hear from the 26% if anybody is sending in questions and comments about why they're uncomfortable with the challenge. Again, this is meant to really serve you guys. Like, we hope this is a better source selection method than writing a 250-page proposal. So we definitely want to hear your opinion about that. So please chime in. So I see somebody there, Cap, who has an interesting thing in chat that I want to hit before this next question. Government and non-traditional organizations have very different opposite cultures. One embraces risk and one avoids. How do you see that gap bridge? I think that is the essence of this contract. So that is really the outcome that we're seeking, right? And so you're going to have to slowly over time sort of change our culture. And remember, you're probably under our Workforce 3 paradigm, where we're a seamless badgeless team. We have about 80 people. I'm guessing you're probably closer to 2/3 or 3/4 of our entire workforce. So I think, you lead by example. You show us the benefit of taking risk. You show us the rewards for taking risk. But I mean, that is the heart of it right there. That's a great comment. I think, all of the barriers to our success are people kind of just not wanting to take a risk. You see that in cybersecurity. You see it to some extent in procurement. You see it all over. You definitely see it in OGC and places like this as people just really, really want a zero risk profile, and that just is not the world. And we can't be successful if we don't take any risks. So you got to help us learn how to do that and what benefit it has. So Tony popped up another question. How do you plan to minimize risk of protest from incumbents with this new strategy? I think we're doing it right now. We're doing everything we can to get buy-in. We don't really look at it as, an incumbent situation. We really view this as a completely different way of doing business and an entirely new strategy. Certainly the people who have contracted with us before should, to some extent, have a leg up. And, if they're willing to adopt these new non-traditional principles and things like that, they should be in good position to compete. And again, that's really a business decision for them. We can't control protests. We will fight protests if we have to. We've done that quite a bit over this last year. I'm sure you can see, protests because people are not happy that we're not aligning our strategy to what they've always done. And those are facts of life, and we're just going to have to overcome them. But we're trying to build something that is broadly very competitive and really forces people to think differently and give us better outcomes. And I don't see anybody really making any kind of argument against that, right? So we'll just do what we have to do. What are the expectations within the first 90 days from a first task order perspective? That's an interesting question. We definitely want to provide a little bit more detail about this, try to get some slides out in a post. That first task order is really to start with what you propose. We really want you to observe what's going on for a little while to give us a plan of action for that first 11-month core task order. And then what we will do is use that 90 days to negotiate that second task order, essentially. And so we'll finalize all of the metrics. We'll finalize your profit percentages. We'll finalize the evaluation plan. We'll give you whatever data you need to get started. Get you CACs, get you computers, get you all that stuff. And the 90-day fixed price task order was meant to be so that we could cover all those activities and have you actually get paid during that time. So again, this is about pulling cash flow to the left. And I just realized when I look left, you probably see me go right, but I do know which direction is which, I promise. That is really about giving you an opportunity to see the lay of the land and get an achievable plan for that first core task order. And then going through the design process and agreeing and putting that task order in place. So this is an interesting poll question, but definitely follow up with the questionnaire as well. Excuse me. We can probably manage to do these every other week, if not even eventually weekly. So this is a good format. We can definitely do it again. If you have any suggestions, we definitely want to hear those too. We want this to be worth your time. I don't want you to just take an hour to stare at my face. It's not that nice of a face. But we really want you to get something out of this. So please let us know. We can talk about it. Hopefully you're willing to see. I'm willing to answer tough questions. Maybe next time you could probably even be a little tougher on me, and we can definitely make some great contracts here. That's really what we want to do. Like I'm trying to embrace user design myself. So hopefully you guys, as a user of my solicitation and contract process, will give me feedback about how this went. Really appreciate everybody coming out and taking the hour with me.